It was a routine White House press briefing, and among the crowd of seasoned journalists was 24-year-old Ava Monroe, the youngest reporter in the room, fresh from a liberal New York City newsroom and new to covering national politics. Sharp, bold, and skeptical, Ava watched President Trump take the podium with a smirk as he launched into his usual confident rhetoric. "We're going to build more schools, create more jobs, and put families first." Ava jotted down the quotes, but whispered sarcastically to a colleague, "Families first, huh? That's rich." Drawing a quiet chuckle, Trump paused, his eyes locking with hers for a moment, but she didn't flinch. The cameras caught it. After the briefing, a senior reporter warned her, "Careful, kid, these briefings are tougher than they look." Ava rolled her eyes. "I'm not afraid of Trump," she said. "He's a character, not a president." What Ava didn't realize was that her real story was about to unfold in the most unexpected way, and the man she once mocked would soon become the only one who truly listened. 2 days later, she received a surprising email from the White House press office. She'd been selected for a one-on-one interview with President Donald J. Trump. Stunned, her first instinct was to decline. This had to be a setup, but her editor pushed her to go, saying, "Get a good story, challenge him a little. You're good at that." Reluctantly, Ava agreed, spending the night preparing sharp questions and digging through past sound bites, determined to press hard and maybe even go viral. The next day, walking into the Oval Office with her recorder in hand, she was greeted by Trump, already seated, who looked up and said casually, "So, you're the one who smirks a lot." Caught off guard, Ava replied, "I guess I am." Trump grinned. "Good. I like people who think differently. Let's talk." What began as a typical interview quickly shifted into something unexpected. Ava fired off her questions, and to her surprise, Trump listened calmly, even smirking now and then. There was no shouting match, no tension, just two people on opposite sides of a wide divide having a real conversation. Then Trump leaned in and asked, "You seem sharp, but a little angry. What's your story?" Ava froze. No one had ever asked her that, especially not during an interview, and definitely not by the person she was grilling. "My story?" she echoed, trying to stay composed. Trump nodded. "Yeah, you've got fire in your questions. That doesn't just come from training, it comes from experience. What's behind that fire?" Ava hesitated. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was the one asking questions, the one in control. But something in his tone was genuine, not condescending. Finally, she spoke. "I grew up in Brooklyn, single mum. She passed when I was 16. I worked my way through college, and now I'm here." Trump leaned back and nodded. "Tough climb. I respect that." The room fell silent as Ava looked down, unexpectedly moved. Ava glanced down at her recorder and realized, to her horror, she hadn't pressed record, a rookie mistake. Reaching for it, she asked, "Mind if we start over?" But Trump shook his head. "No need. Sometimes the best conversations aren't meant to be recorded." She didn't know what to make of him. This wasn't the man the headlines painted, at least not in that moment. His question lingered in her chest, and for the first time, she didn't laugh. That night, in her tiny DC apartment, sleep escaped, her as his words replayed in her mind. What's behind that fire? She thought of her late mother, Janet Monroe, a nurse who worked double shifts and skipped meals so Ava could eat. Janet was tough, opinionated, and never afraid to argue, even about politics, even about Trump. Ava remembered one night during the 2016 campaign when her mother, coughing between sips of tea, watched a Trump rally and said, "Say what you want about the man, but he talks like someone who's been knocked down and got back up." Back then, Ava had rolled her eyes and replied, "He's a showman, Mum." Janet had smiled and said, "So was Churchill." That ended up being their last political conversation. 3 months later, her mum was gone, taken by lung cancer, with no insurance and no real help. Just Ava, left behind, drowning in hospital bills and holding on to raw ambition. Maybe that was the fire Trump saw in her. Not anger, but grief. Ava wiped her eyes and stared at the ceiling, wondering if the president, or anyone in Washington, truly understood how many young people carried stories like hers. Did they care what real life felt like beyond the speeches and sound bites? For the first time, she wasn't so sure. The next morning, her phone rang from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hello," came the voice. "Miss Monroe, this is Linda from the White House. The president would like to personally invite you to join him on a community visit in Pennsylvania tomorrow. It's off the record." Ava blinked. "Wait, he wants me to come with him?" "Yes," he said. "Bring the smirker." Ava almost laughed. Almost. "Will there be press?" she asked. "Just one journalist," Linda replied. "You." After hanging up, Ava just sat there, stunned. She paced her apartment, questioning everything. Was this a PR stunt? A trap? Or something else entirely? Her editor's voice echoed in her head. "If you want the truth, go find it." The next morning, Ava boarded Air Force One beside the very man she'd once mocked on Twitter. He greeted her with a donut and a Diet Coke. "You like factories?" he asked. "Not particularly," she replied. "Too bad. We're going to one." The flight was quiet, but Ava's thoughts weren't. She had no idea this day would unravel everything she thought she knew. Not just about Trump, but about herself. When the presidential motorcade arrived at a small manufacturing plant in a Rust Belt Pennsylvania town, workers gathered, some in overalls, some holding signs reading, "Thank you for noticing us." Trump waved as they entered, but Ava kept her recorder off. She was there to observe, not report, not yet. Inside, the machines hummed as Carla, the floor supervisor, greeted the president. "We reopened last year thanks to that tax credit bill," she said, lifting her rough, work-worn hands. "These hands were idle for 2 years before that." Trump smiled and replied, "Glad you're back in business." Then he turned to Ava. "This one here's." Trump introduced Ava as the future of journalism, smart, tough, still learning, making her cringe a little as she shook Carla's hand and said, "Pleasure to meet you." They toured the plant, and at one point, a worker quietly pulled Trump aside to show him a photo of his son, who had just joined the Navy, saying Trump's speech gave him hope. Ava stood back, watching. This wasn't the usual Trump with big claims and sound bites. He was just listening, nodding, asking questions. By the time the tour ended, Ava hadn't taken a single note. Instead of sound bites, she was hearing real stories. The motorcade made a surprise stop at a local VFW hall. No press, no stage, just folding chairs, coffee, and a circle of workers, veterans, and families. Trump walked in and asked, "Mind if I join you folks?" And Ava followed, notebook in hand, but unsure if she'd even use it. A little girl stared wide-eyed from her father's lap. A single mom named Teresa spoke up about losing her diner job and finding new work thanks to a small business grant. A young veteran in a wheelchair said he'd finally heard back from the VA after 3 years. No one was polished. They stammered, cried, spoke plainly, and Trump let them. Ava watched silently, surprised. When it ended, he turned to her and said, "People like them. That's why we wake up every morning. You want truth? Start with them." That night, Ava sat alone in her hotel room, staring out at the blinking town lights, her mind full. Not with quotes, but with questions. Outside her window, Ava's phone buzzed with texts from colleagues. "How's the circus? Get him to slip up yet?" But she didn't respond. Her thoughts were on her mother. Janet would have loved that town hall, the honesty, the emotion. Ava reached for her old recorder, still holding one saved file. Her mother, frail from chemo, leaving a final message. "Sweetheart, don't chase power. Chase people. Stories that hurt and heal. That's where truth lives, even if it comes from the mouths you least expect." Ava closed her eyes. She had mocked Trump because it was easy, but the people she'd met weren't jokes. They were surviving, and, maybe in his own way, so was he. Whispering, "I miss you, Mum," she knew her next step. The following morning on Air Force One, Trump leaned back with coffee and asked, "So, Miss Monroe, what's your take on yesterday?" Ava paused, then for once put down her notepad. "I thought it'd be a show, but those people weren't props, and you weren't who I expected." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" "An observation," she replied. Then he surprised her again. "I looked you up. Your mum was a nurse." Ava nodded, guarded. "She sounds like she raised a fighter." "She did." Ava spoke softly. "She passed before seeing me make it here." Trump tapped his ring on the table. "You know, we lose people, but sometimes their voices show up when we least expect it. My brother died young. I never forgot the sound of his advice." Ava looked at him, really looked, beyond the headlines and bluster, and what she saw wasn't a caricature, but a man carrying his own grief. Back in DC, Ava opened her laptop. The headline stared back. "Behind the curtain, my 48 hours with President Trump." She began typing, not with sarcasm or mockery, but honesty. She described the factory, the town hall, the single mother, the veteran, the wide-eyed little girl, and quoted Trump, not to ridicule, but to reveal a side no one else bothered to see. When she submitted the draft, her editor called within minutes. "This isn't what we expected." Ava replied, "I know. It reads like, you respected him." "I respected what I saw. Not the myth, the man, and the people who believe in him." Silence fell on the line. "We might lose readers over this." "Then maybe they never wanted the truth to begin with," Ava said, then hung up. For the first time in her career, she didn't write to win. She wrote to understand. Within hours of publication, her article went viral, but not how she hoped. Her inbox flooded with angry emails. "How dare you humanize him? Did you get paid for this fluff? We expected better from you." Colleagues started avoiding her. One editor messaged privately, "We all laughed at him for a reason. Don't forget who we are." But Ava wasn't laughing anymore. She reread her article 3 times. There was no praise, no spin, just the raw truth of people's lives, and one man who, for a few hours, had simply listened. Then her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She answered. "Miss Monroe, it's Donald," she blinked. "Mr. President, you did something most won't. You told the story straight. Don't let the mob rewrite it, even if it costs me everything." She asked, "Especially then?" The line went dead, but his words stayed. 3 days later, Ava found a handwritten letter in her mailbox, not from anyone expected. The letter wasn't from a politician or editor. It was from a woman named Linda in Kansas. "I cried reading your article. My husband lost his job 2 years ago, and when President Trump visited our town, he listened. Not as a politician, but as a person. No one believed me until I read your words. Thank you." There was no donation plea or political rant, just a heartfelt message from one stranger to another. Ava pinned the letter on her wall. Then more envelopes arrived. Veterans, single mums, small-town teachers, all thanking her, not for taking sides, but for truly seeing them. She hadn't lost her voice. She had finally found it. Later that week, Ava visited her father's grave for the first time in months. They hadn't spoken much before he passed, a quiet Navy veteran, stern and patriotic, who had voted for Trump. Kneeling by his headstone, she whispered, "I understand you." Better now. A soft breeze passed as she pulled from her coat pocket a small photo of her and her mom from years ago, tucked it beneath the flowers, and softly said goodbye before leaving. "If you were here, Dad, I'd tell you, I finally listened instead of laughed. It's not forgiveness, not yet, but it's the first step." Days later, Ava got an unexpected message inviting her to join a televised roundtable on a political journalism network, interested in her change of perspective. She hesitated, wondering if she was becoming the story now. But then she remembered her mum's voice. Tell the stories no one wants to hear, she accepted. Under the blinding studio lights, seasoned pundits sat across from her. One sneered before they even went live. So you went soft, huh? Ava smiled gently. No, I just stopped being loud long enough to listen. The host raised an eyebrow. And what did you hear? Truth, from voices we ignore. Some wore mega hats, some overalls, but all wore humanity. The room fell, silent. Weeks later, a small box arrived at Ava's newsroom. No name, just the presidential seal. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note. Ava, your mother would be proud. Keep telling real stories. P.S. This belonged to my brother. I've filled a few pages myself. Now it's your turn to fill the rest. Donald J. Trump. Ava held the journal close. It smelled of old ink and worn pages. She opened it and saw scribbled on the first page. Everyone has a story. Don't forget to ask. She didn't cry, not this time. She just picked up her pen. Later, a journalism professor from Ava's old university invited her to speak at their graduation, saying her journey reflected what journalism truly needs today. At first, Ava hesitated, unsure if she belonged on any stage. But then she remembered herself at 21, wide-eyed, cynical, mocking what she didn't understand. At the event, standing behind the podium before dozens of students, she said, "Truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Worn hands, cracked voices, eyes that have seen too much. And yes, sometimes truth wears a red tie and surprises you." There was a pause, then applause. A video of her speech was uploaded online, though she hadn't known anyone recorded it, and within days, the video racked up 3 million views, sparking floods of comments. I judged too quickly. Maybe we should all listen more. She made me rethink everything. Even some journalists who once mocked Ava reached out saying, "Let's talk." But Ava didn't want fame or to be a symbol. She was just a woman who stopped laughing long enough to truly listen, and that changed everything. One quiet evening, after a small-town journalism workshop, Ava sat alone in a diner, playing her mum's recording again. You'll know you're doing it right when the truth doesn't scream. It hums, it lingers. She closed her eyes, then her phone rang. It was the president. "I read your speech," Trump said. "You nailed it, not even a mention of me by name." Ava smiled. "You were part of the story, but the real stars were your people." He chuckled. "They always are." In that moment, two unlikely people, once divided by assumptions, shared a rare, mutual respect. Months later, Ava's name appeared in national bylines again, not because she chased power, but because she told the truth, but because she chased people, not headlines. Her series on rural families, veteran suicides, and single mothers went viral, not for outrage, but for compassion. Quietly pinned above her desk was the letter from Linda in Kansas, a constant reminder of who she wrote for. The world hadn't changed much, but Ava had, and maybe, just maybe, a few others did too. That was enough. At a small journalism gala, Ava accepted an award for integrity in reporting, wearing a simple black dress and gripping the microphone with shaking hands. "Funny," she began. "I used to laugh at people who believed in things I didn't understand." The room fell silent. But then I met a man I didn't expect to respect, and through him, I met a country I'd forgotten to see. She paused. "If my mum were here, she'd probably just say, 'Took you long enough.'" The audience chuckled, and so did she, because now her laugh wasn't mocking. It was grateful, whole, and carried the voices of all those stories she once missed but would never forget.